Let's look at the second method of finding the LCM in this video. I call it the common factors method, and some people call it the ladder method. So let's pick the same two numbers as I did earlier, that is 18 and 24. And the way you set it up is you draw an L. And what you need to do is find factors that are common to both 18 and 24. I can think of at least three numbers, or maybe just three numbers that are common to both 18 and 24, and that's 2, 3, and 6. And I can start with any of these factors. So let me start with 2. And if I factor out the 2, I am left with 9 here, and I'm left with 12 here. Now I know that 3 is a common factor between 9 and 12, so I can factor that out. And once I factor out the 3, I'm left with a 3 here and a 4 here. Now there is no common factor between 3 and 4, so that tells me that I have to stop and I can find my LCM. The way you find the LCM is you draw an L around these numbers, and the LCM is actually the product of all these numbers. So the LCM equals 2 times 3 times 3 times 4, and 2 times 3 is 12, and 2 times 3 is 6, and 3 times 4 is 12. So that is 6 times 12, that is 72. So that was fairly simple. Now let's see how this method works for three numbers. With three numbers, you have to be careful. So let's challenge ourselves and pick some numbers that are bigger. So I'm going to pick 40, 120, and 56. And let me set it up the same way. Now the thing with three numbers is that if you can find a factor that is common to all these three numbers, then you can factor it out. I know that 4 is a common factor for all these numbers, so I will factor out the 4, and I'm left with 10, 30, and 14. But the thing is that if there is a factor that's common to only some of the numbers, then that factor has to be a prime number. For example, that I know that 10 is a common factor between 10 and 30, but 10 is not a prime number, so I cannot factor that out. But 5 is a prime number. I can factor out the 5, and if I factor out the 5, I'm left with a 2, a 6, and 5 is not a factor of 14, so I just bring down the 14 the way it is. Now, these three are all even numbers, so I know I can factor out the 2. And I'm left with 1, 3, and 7. And 1, 3, and 7 don't have any common factors between them. So I know that I have to stop. And the way you would find the LCM is you make a big L around all these numbers. And the LCM is the product of all these numbers. So LCM equals 4 times 5 times 2 times 1 times 3 times 7. So that's 10 times 12, that's 120, and 120 times 7 is 840. I like this way of finding the LCM. It's a simple process and it's fairly easy to remember. And it works really beautifully for two numbers. With three or more numbers, you have to be careful. You have to be careful with the common factors. And what I have done here is, let me get rid of this. So with three or more numbers, the way you go about it is, if you find a factor that is common to all the numbers, then it does not have to be a prime number. But if you find a factor that is common to only some of the numbers, then it has to be a prime factor. And if you remember this rule well, then this method to find the LCM can be simple and can be quite efficient. In the next video, we will look at how to find the LCM using prime factorization.